So good day, everybody. I'm Marvin Thomas, a Heritage Planning and Policy Advisor with the Heritage Conservation Branch here at the Ministry of Parks, Culture and Sport. And this is the second day of our winter webinar series. Welcome back to everyone who took in Tuesday's presentations, and greetings to those who are just joining us today. So to begin, I respectfully acknowledge that here in Regina, we're in Treaty 4 territory. These are the traditional lands of the Cree, the Nakota, Dakota, and Lakota, the Anishinaabe, and the homeland of the Métis. So in today's presentations, we're going to see how two communities creatively repurposed surplus schools. Now, we know that schools are always important centers of community life, but what happens to school buildings when new educational facilities are needed? So in these two communities, schools no longer needed for educational purposes are still important hubs of activity, thanks to the collaboration of community organizations and residents and the local government. And before introducing our first speaker, I'll again remind everybody, please keep your microphones and cameras turned off during the presentations, and we'll hold questions until the end of the hour. And you can also put questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those as we can. So our first presenter is Jen Bench. She's the Economic Development Officer for the Village of Abbey and the Rural Municipality of Myrie Creek, and Secretary Treasurer of the Abbey Business and Community Center Board. And Jen, I'm really looking forward to hearing how Abbey's former school is now serving as a facility for some important programs in your community. So as you turn on your mic and camera, I will just cue up your presentation and turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Marvin.
Just take a moment.
Okay, perfect. Should be good to start then, hey?
Go right ahead.
Okay, thanks. So hi, everybody. I'm coming to you live from the community of Abbey, and I'm honored to be here to talk about my hometown and share a few of the amazing things that we've accomplished. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know Abbey, it's a friendly village in southwest Saskatchewan. We're bordered by the Great Sandhills just to the west of us and the South Saskatchewan River to the north. We're about 100 kilometers northwest of Swift Current on Highway 32. Our primary industry is agriculture. Currently, there's about 100 people living in the village and just under 400 in the surrounding RM of Myrie Creek. So we're very small, but we have accomplished a lot of unbelievable things given our size, and I'm very proud to call Abbey home. Next slide. So 2023 marks our village's 110-year anniversary. We were incorporated in 1913, the same year that the railroad was built here. So at one time, Abbey was really a bustling place. We had 6 grain elevators, a couple livery barns, a hospital, one of the oldest General Motors dealerships in Western Canada, a drugstore, multiple general stores, pool room, and just so much more. But like so many rural communities in this province, we've seen a lot of tremendous changes over the last several decades. So with growing farms, we've seen decreasing population and business closures and exportation of a lot of young people. So next slide. Along with the evolution of businesses and housing, our education has also really evolved and changed over the last 110 years. So that picture in the top left is of Abbey's first school, and that was built in 1915. And that building's actually still used. The photo on the top right there is of our Legion Hall. So that building's in great shape and it's still being utilized. And then in 1920, a 2-room school, a brick school was built, and that's the picture on the bottom left there. So unfortunately, it was demolished in the late 60s for reasons I'm not really sure of, but wow, I wish we still had that. It would have been a fantastic building to still have around, but it's not, unfortunately. So later, a larger high school was built, and that opened in 1958. And then a gym was added on a few years later in the 60s, and then an elementary end was added on in the 80s. And that's the building that still stands today, the bottom right picture there. So one of the big, oh, sorry, that's not quite done on that one. One of the biggest hits to our community was 10 years ago when our school closed. Many people honestly thought that this was going to be the most devastating thing to happen to us, and there was a lot of negativity after that, unfortunately. But thanks to the vision of some community members, a lot of positive has come from this devastation, and this building has really grown into much more than we could have ever envisioned. So it's really become a living part of our community and our culture. Next slide now. So after the school closed in 2012, there was really a lot of debate about what to do with the building. It's the first thing you see when you come into town, and it's really a big part of the identity of our community. Something just popped up there. The school division had thoughts of tearing it down. However, they soon realized that it would be cheaper just to have the village, for them to pay the village to take it over, and so that's what was done. So we were left with thousands of square footage of empty space and an uncertainty of what to do with it and how to pay for it. So there was a lot of skepticism about whether a community of such a small size could maintain and utilize a building of such a large size. And originally it was just going to be our hall. That's all it started out as. The previous hall needed a lot of repairs, so this was an opportunity to move into this new space. But it's really just become so much more than that over the last decade, and it's evolved into a business and social incubator for the region. And it was appropriately named the Abbey Business and Community Center when it opened in 2013. Next slide. So we don't often think of a building constructed in the 50s as having historical or heritage value. But as I mentioned, this building is a huge part of the identity of our community. My parents both went to school there. I went to school there from grade 4 to 12. And I personally feel a lot of nostalgia every time I walk into the building. And I know a lot of people feel the same. And I think our community has come up with a really unique, sustainable way of maintaining a historically valuable building and allowing it to continue to contribute to the quality of life in rural Saskatchewan. So these pictures are just a few examples of things that the building is currently used for. So we host craft fairs and community auctions, kids camps, comedy nights, archery, and just so much more. The building's used virtually every day by different groups and individuals for various culture, rec, sport, and education purposes. So I'm just going to get into a little bit more of the logistics and amenities of the building. Please feel free to jot down any notes or questions that you may have and pop them in the chat, and I'll get to those at the end of the session if we have time. So right now the building is owned and operated as a subsidiary of the Village of Abbey. There's a volunteer board of 9 to 10 individuals who oversee the operation of the building. And several years ago, they formed a partnership with the village and the RM to hire an economic development officer. So since starting my position as the EDO, there's really been tremendous changes to the center. And with the help of volunteers, we've really been able to take it to a whole nother level. So we've been able to take virtually every aspect from the school and repurpose it to repurpose the space for other uses. Slide. So one of the first things to go into the center was a coffee and meeting room. So every morning, Coffee Row meets at the center and in a room that was formerly the staff room. And it's a way for us to make a little bit of money by selling coffee on the honor system. And it's a place for people to socialize. And then we also generate revenue from rent. So one of our popular rooms that we've converted, a classroom that we've converted into a meeting room, is rented out for various things, 4-H, elections, producer meetings, baby showers, things like that. Slide. The Chinook Regional Library was a great addition to our building, so they've taken over the school's library space, and so we generate rent from them utilizing that room. And they host all kinds of different activities throughout the year and have regular hours for patrons. Slide. Obviously, one of the biggest parts of a school is the gymnasium. So we now use the gym as our community hall. So it's used for reunions and birthdays, funerals, birthday parties, community fundraisers, paint nights, various things. And then it's also used recreationally a lot for 4-H and archery. There's a weekly tennis and pickleball group that comes and uses it, volleyball, yoga, activities like that. Every year, young people in our community organize a big steak and lobster benefit for the center, where we offer a delicious meal, and we have live and silent auctions and entertainment. And that event has generated hundreds of thousands of dollars for the community center over the years. And actually, we have our 8th annual event coming up next week. So we're busy planning and preparing for that. And the event is just a huge success. It sold out in one day, and we host about 200 people at that. And it's been a great event for our community. In this room, we have done a few things since taking over. We've updated the flooring, and we painted. We replaced the boiler with a newer boiler for the heating system for this room. And then in that photo on the right, you can see the eagle still up on the wall as a tribute to the old Abbey Eagles days when it was still a school. So there's still some touches of the school throughout the building. Next slide. Another source of revenue that we've implemented is memberships to the building. So people can, families and individuals can access the building 24/7 for recreation purposes. So one of the classrooms has been converted into a fitness center, and another's been made into a billiards and games room. So people with memberships can come and go as they please and utilize those spaces. Slide. The playroom's been a really great place for families to gather. We've had weekly play groups that come here. We've hosted Christmas and Easter parties for kids. And then we also offer kids summer programming, which has given us an opportunity to hire a summer student and employ a young person in our community, which has been fantastic. And then we also rent this room out for birthday parties and things, which also helps to generate some revenue. One of the rooms in the center has been converted into a salon and massage therapist space. So this room was full of junk. It was a matter of just cleaning it out. We got some of the equipment from a salon that had closed in town and installed that. And now we rent it out to hairstylists and massage therapists, and even some people with home-based businesses host parties here. So that's been a great way to use that little space. One of the biggest projects that we have undertaken is the addition of a secondhand store. And this room was actually the science lab. So it was full of old equipment and chemicals and things. So with the help of some fabulous volunteers, we cleaned it out and we painted it. And then we started taking donations. And we actually started generating revenue before we were even open. This store is 100% volunteer ran, and everything's donated, so there's zero cost to this. And most of our volunteers that work at the store are very willing to take a couple shifts a month. They love it for a social outing, and it gives them something to do in the winter. And I know even myself, I was skeptical if this model would work in such a small town, but it's really been well received. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about it, and it's generated tens of thousands of dollars of revenue for the center, and it's just really far exceeded my expectations. So it's been a great addition. And then obviously school grounds come with a lot of outdoor space. So we've been able to utilize this in a lot of unique ways over the years. We've hosted Ritchie Brothers community auctions and community events such as our Canada 150 celebration. And then this fall, we were winners of the Grey Cup Richardson Pioneer Community Celebration. So we hosted Gaynor the Gopher and the Rider cheerleaders, some Rider alumni, and the Grey Cup came to Abbey. So we had beer gardens and a bouncy castle and show and shine and other family-friendly activities on the grounds there. And then this year, for the first time, we're going to be hosting the 4-H Achievement Day, the Beef Club Achievement Day, and our 110-year homecoming. So we're looking forward to those events. One of the larger capital projects that we have undertaken is replacing the playground. So we were able to raise funds for this through grants, donations, and fundraisers. And it's really been fantastic. It's the only playground in town, and it's been really well received by families and children in the area. So these are just a few examples of some events we've hosted over the years. This fall we had Chris Getzlaff come for a sports banquet and to raise money for a rink. We've hosted a Christmas movie night. We've got a big projector screen in the gym, so we put a movie on and have popcorn for the kids. We host an Easter party every year where the kids do an Easter egg hunt on the grounds. We've had a few color runs. I mentioned the steak and lobster evening. That's one of our biggest fundraisers for the year. And then we have our summer play program that I mentioned as well, and the Christmas craft fair and trade show where local businesses can come and sell their products. And that's always a huge success as well. I really like the expression use it or lose it. So success for us has lied in the space being a living part of our community rather than just a museum of days gone by. It's just such a large space, and we've been able to utilize a lot of it for unique ways. Next. So although this is no longer a school, there's still a sense of nostalgia with the building, so especially in the hallway. So we've kept pieces of the school, including all the pictures of the graduating classes right when you walk in the door there. There's the eagle on the gym wall that I mentioned. The Abbey High School lettering is still in the floor of the hallway. All the honor roll plaques are still there, and all the old trophies from our volleyball glory days. So we really want to find a balance between honoring the past and the use of the building as a school and its current and future use as a community center. So we're trying to find that balance. Challenges. Obviously, capital improvements on a building of this size and age have been huge. So in the last few years, we've replaced the entire heating system of the building. We replaced boiler heat on the majority of the building, with the exception of the gym, with forced air. And that cost tens of thousands of dollars. And then our biggest issue was our roof. It was a flat roof and it was leaking. When it would rain inside. It was awful. So we replaced that roof a few years ago, and it cost $250,000 at that time. We've also updated the kitchen. We've updated some flooring. We're going to be updating windows this summer. And it just seems with a building of this size and age, there's always something that needs doing. So we're always looking ahead to, okay, we've finished this. Now what do we need to do next? Another challenge is rising utility costs, and there isn't a whole lot we can do to mitigate this except increase efficiency, which we've done with the furnaces, and by replacing these windows, we're hoping that helps to cut back on some of those costs. And then another problem that's facing a lot of communities is motivating volunteers following the pandemic, and there's no easy solution for this. I've attended multiple seminars and workshops on this, and there's no one answer. I think that we need to reapproach how we engage volunteers and take baby steps to getting them back involved in things. And couple things I've tried to do is have less meetings, because people don't want to waste their time going to meetings, and making people feel appreciated. I think if we can build on some of those small things, then people will start coming back around. So how did we do it? How did a village of 100 people do this? So volunteers are number one and have been critical to this project. We are fortunate that our community is full of really positive, enthusiastic, motivated people who want to see this area thrive, and that's key. Without them, this would not be possible. So a project like this, you need to have the community behind it. You need to serve their needs and interests with programming and activities and events. When our roof was deteriorating, we had a community meeting. We as in the board of the ABC Center, and the community showed up and they brought their checkbooks, and we didn't honestly think we could raise $250,000 and to replace that roof, and we did it, and we did it ahead of schedule. So that's just a testament to the community's commitment to this building. Another thing that's huge is collaboration. So we're really trying to partner with nearby communities to build relationships and reciprocate support. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. We actually just launched a regional website called 3 Points, and we're hoping to increase foreign investment in our area and hopefully increase our population, fill some of those labor shortages that we're experiencing right now. So we've worked together on that. We've partnered with Cabery and Hazlet. So we're going to put the link to that website in at the end to check it out. It's really a fantastic website. So, and then hiring an EDO has been fantastic too. It's taken a lot of pressure off of volunteers. Having someone in a paid position to write grants and oversee projects has really been a catalyst for bringing things to another level. And I know that was a lot for the community to put out at the beginning, but I think they've seen the return on that and have been quite pleased with their decision to do that. So, and then obviously fundraising, sponsorships, and grants are key. We are 100% self-sufficient. We do not receive any municipal funding. So we rely on fundraising, sponsorship, and grants to keep our lights on. And I think we've done a great job of just focusing on what we have rather than what we had, and not getting hung up on the past too much, and just focusing on the positive, because positivity can be contagious. Future plans. So we're currently in the process of opening a daycare, which will fill the last remaining empty classrooms in the building. And as mentioned, we recently updated the playground equipment. So this summer, we're going to be installing rubber paving to complete that outdoor space. And then hosting the 110-year celebration homecoming and replacing some of those windows in a few of the classrooms in the older end of the building. Next, yep. The future looks pretty good for the center in our village. We actually have we have a lot of young, motivated families and business owners who are enthusiastic and who are willing to put in the work to keep things thriving. We definitely don't have all the answers, and we have been faced with a lot of challenges, but I think positivity is important. I try not to focus on opinions that I hear about you shouldn't do that or that'll never work. Small things can add up to large outcomes. So it might not seem like it's important to paint a room, but once you do that, and then you add flooring, and then you add all these other things, all those add up to big successes. And I'm just so grateful that this building's still able to thrive and continues to give back to the community in a different way than it was originally intended when it was built as a school. I think it's a prime example of capitalizing on the ongoing changes in rural Saskatchewan and what we continue to face. We took lemons and we made lemonade, and we've come up with creative ways to utilize thousands of square footage of opportunistic space. And I think this could be a model that could work for for communities of any size. If it can work for us, it can work for anybody. So be sure to stop in at the ABC Center the next time you're on Highway 32 going to the Sandhills. Check out our social media and websites to stay up to date with everything that we're doing in our community. And thank you all for being here today. And thanks, Marvin, for having me. And be sure to pop any questions in there for at the end of the session. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Jen. That was great. You know, I was thinking as I was watching this, as Jen noted, you know, the Abbey School might challenge the stereotypical idea of what a heritage building looks like. But as we learned, it's been an important focus of Abbey's life for over a half a century. And it's really a good illustration that heritage value doesn't always lie in grand buildings and high style architecture. What's of value is the historical connection that people have to a place and the meanings it holds for them. And I think Jen's presentation showed that very well. And so thank you, Jen. So I will introduce our next presenter. It's going to be about another school building that was living on borrowed time. until some local residents became concerned about the possible loss of a historic landmark and saw a need for a community arts center. So to tell us about the transformation of Fort Qu'Appel's old central school into the Qu'Appelle Valley Center for the Arts, I'm pleased to introduce Jim Harding. Jim is the past president of the Qu'Appelle Valley Center for the Arts and was co-coordinator with Marion Campbell of efforts to save and repurpose the school. So Jim, I'll just cue up your slides and then turn it over to you.
Great.
Just bear with me one moment. There, I think we're up.
Okay, so congratulations to people in Abby. That sounds like a mammoth project, and it shows a small community can set the way for the rest of us. Old Central School turned 100 the year we reversed the decision to demolish it. It's been here as part of the landscape long before a lot of the trees have grown up and greened up the valley. In 2010, the town decommissioned the building and canceled a roofing contract. It was already leaking. And then later that year, they made the decision to demolish. There was concern among different people in the community, and some of us got together quickly. We got 200 names to a town council meeting calling for reuse. We formed an ad hoc committee. From the very beginning, we knew we'd need a reuse strategy. And 18 months later, after intense community mobilizing, we were having a public meeting at the local high school. We had a couple of counselors turn up and change their minds. And we had some heritage resource people at the meeting. And we ended up getting our proposal accepted by the town to take on restoring and reusing the building. There had been there was damage occurring. There were broken pipes, there were freezing, there was ice on the floors, and it was well on its way to demolition by neglect. And I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't acted quickly, if it had gone through another winter, but we did act quickly. Ross Keith and some others in the Heritage Network came and inspected to make it clear to the town that this was structurally an incredibly sound building, old as it may be. So there's what it was. It was a school in this area for years. There's what it looked like when we finished it. And we really did have to work hard for that 18 months, but we started down a new road of establishing a partnership with the town. Now, from about 2011 to 2014, we really worked intensely in work crews from mornings of Mondays and Fridays, and then we slowly scaled down. We had an appreciation night on in 2018, and we did a calculation that about 200 people had in some way contributed to the project over the decade. That included 20 local businesses, that included 30 people who had served on the board, 40 people who had helped with events committee meetings, and about 50 in the work crews. Of course, it's a hard core that keeps it going, and you've got pictures of some of the people who stayed with the work crews over those years. We got funding through Community Improvements Fund and matched their $50,000 grant with local fundraising, which started the re-roofing. It's a similar story to Abbey, really. Roofing, big cost. Then we started to restore different rooms, and we put them into use once we had them done, which was a smart decision because people began to come for events and see the other work required. So the gallery was done first, then the performance room, then we finished up the dance studio upstairs, and then a multi-purpose room, and then the last space was a pottery studio in the basement, and you'll see some pictures of that after. In 2014, there's the dance studio. In 2014, we finally got the letter of agreement with the town. And it was a partnership agreement where they would maintain ownership. They would do make sure the infrastructure was solid and sound, and we would operate it, pay for operating expenses, and continue to fundraise for improvements. And that agreement in 2014 said a similar one could be renewed and that there would only be changes by mutual consent. Then the reuse course, after the intensive years of hard work, the reuse just continued to expand into the community. And there was no doubt that once that space was available, people were going to make use of it. And we got acknowledged in 2016 with the Provincial Heritage Award for the best heritage reuse project. All this time, events were growing. A big draw was the Home Roots concerts, which we worked out with the Winnipeg people who send musicians out. Normally they were done in homes. We made an agreement to treat our performance room like a living room. And we've had a lot of top-notch musicians come through here en route from, say, Winnipeg to Regina, and drawn in a lot of people from the local community. Next slide. The pottery studio, the gallery, we've had showings on a regular basis. I think the most successful project was the pop-up art market twice a year, up to 20 people who were in arts and crafts showing their wares. We've had instructors running pottery classes in the basement. Our challenges, of course, while all this is happening, is to keep the nonprofit organization going and to do the governance, to develop the policies, to make sure there's volunteers on the committees, and of course that's the invisible thing that that Jen talked about in Abbey as well. Next slide. So these are some of the events. The quilt showing was quite amazing because hundreds of quilts were shown. When the PCTC was closing down, they had quilts, and so we auctioned them off. Okay, continue. We've had a lot of music workshops. This is a drumming workshop, actually, with a Cuban drummer. Next. And open mics regularly, and a whole range of guests and local performers over the years. Next. Now, as usual, this is the board just before the renegotiation of the partnership agreement with the town. It'd be nicer to have the picture of the 200 people, but they were never there at the same time. But the challenges of this project are multiple. In the first period, saving the school, mobilizing in the community for a reuse was crucial. We did a needs assessment to involve about 30 local organizations, which is where the concept of the Art Center got consolidated. We began to realize that the different classrooms in the school actually could be left in the same shape but rebuilt. We re-insulated, we did energy upgrade, new wiring, and all of the things you have to do. But basically, it's still a school with 4 classrooms used for different purposes around arts and culture. The pottery in the basement, of course. The governance challenges of keeping people involved. Well, in that second period of restoring the school, we had to balance building a nonprofit that legally could handle the money and charge rents and commissions and be responsible to the community. We had to build more and more of a partnership with the town that continued to own the building, and then build partnerships with groups like Valley Dance, which is one of certainly the most reliable partners. Were there a co-op for potters? There'd probably be more activities, but that would be work that would have to be done parallel to the school. Certainly the pop-up art brought clusters of arts and cultural people together. So the model of keeping a nonprofit going, continuing with and strengthening the partnership with the town while bringing more people into the real volunteer community, challenging at all times, balancing the restoration of the building with the growing interest in events was a challenge, because events will draw people, work crews, maybe not so much. The ongoing work in the upgrading of the building, of course, still takes volunteers. But certainly it was a balancing act. Now that it's an established part of the community, the challenge is, in my view, to institutionalize arts and culture opportunities in Fort Qu'Appelle. And that is going to take some work, because at this point, the partnership with the town doesn't guarantee that these services are going to be sustainable. And whether the volunteer model with a nonprofit organization doing the operation of the center, no paid staff, by the way, whether that will prove to be viable or whether there will need to be another model developed, I guess time will tell. We've had to be the collective memory of the project, the volunteers, because as people know, local government has such turnover that sometimes the collective memory among the elected officials is not there. And sometimes older buildings aren't seen as potential reuse, cultural and economic possibilities. So sometimes the volunteers have to do a lot of convincing. We had a particular problem of turnover of administrators, 7 or 8 during this period, which also creates difficulties and challenges in terms of continuity of the partnership and stability of the programs. This is a great success story from a heritage point of view, from a reuse point of view, and from a community enhancement or quality of life point of view. So we hope, with the pandemic maybe starting to recede, we can rebuild the kind of enthusiasm that was certainly there among this group of people you're looking at now. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. So the Arts Center, I mean, it really is such a great example of giving new life to a surplus school building. And congratulations to your organization and the town and all your supporters for creating a community amenity that's obviously a significant asset for the town of Fort Qu'Appelle and beyond. And I'd also like to give a shout out and thanks to board member Lorna Evans for her work behind the scenes, helping to organize the webinar. Much appreciated, Lorna. So we do have time. Jim and Jen are still here with us to take some questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can, raise a hand with the hand icon. We'll call on you, or just speak up if you'd rather do that, or put something in the chat, and we'd be happy to field those, as many as we can.
I see a question here. How do we control access into the building with all the different people accessing it? Great question. There was some problems at the beginning. We did have some mischievous people come and set off some fire extinguishers. So we've since put in security cameras, and that has helped. And for the most part, it's not an issue. People are pretty respectful, because it's all of our building. So we've been, I guess, fortunate that we haven't had any other mishaps with that. But the doors all have code. So people punch in that code when they get their membership. We give them the code. They punch that in, and then they can come and go as they please.
Okay. And just while people are thinking of their questions, Jim, I was curious about the extent of the work you did on the building in terms of the heating, cooling, electrical, that sort of thing, because heritage buildings are always thought of as energy hogs and inefficient to operate, and they do need some upgrades, really. But just wondering what the nature of things,
Well,
of work that was needed there.
That building, for its 100 years, had no insulation and had been heated originally by coal, so you can imagine the carbon footprint. We super insulated the attic and had to build new walls inside every one of the classrooms. So we shrunk the space somewhat so we could get insulation and vapor barriers. And so that building, its energy efficiency went up dramatically. We finally had to replace the old steam boiler, notoriously unreliable heat, great heat for as long as your metal doesn't erode from the minerals. So we have now a boiler hot water system, which went in maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And in some sense, that was the last test of the partnership with the town, because we'd done $250,000 of upgrades with free labor mostly, and a lot of that costs contributions from businesses. And they were finally challenged to deal with that as part of their agreement. And so that $50,000 went into rebuilding the heating system. We had upgraded all the electricity at our cost early on. This building, just like you're challenged in Abbey, has a need for new windows at some point. And so new carpeting and new windows. So there's always an ongoing challenge, but we kept the costs pretty low considering what the market costs would have been for. I was told we were probably running a project at about a quarter costs of hiring contractors. The electrical contractor who came in wanted to tear everything out and gave us a $30,000 estimate. I contacted a local electrician and we talked about working backwards, and we did it for $10,000. So there's some old wiring, but it's all code. So we worked backwards, finally got 200 amp in at the town's expense. So we were pretty innovative with costing and keeping the costs as low as possible. But that is a solid building. That building could be here for another 100 years. It's one of those solid buildings built by Mason settlers. And you can see these buildings all the way along the number 1 from Wolseley right to Fort Qu'Appelle, to Indian Head. It's a landmark that definitely makes the town feel more what it historically was, and makes the town more vibrant in the present, which is the same theme as Abbey. We're honoring the past, but we're certainly reusing it to remake the future.
Okay, so this is a question for either Jim or Jen, or perhaps both. Can you speak more about your process for determining new uses? What sort of needs assessment thinking was needed or process? Um, Either of you want to jump in on that?
Go ahead, Jen.
There was no formal needs assessment done. I think we've kind of just as a board brainstormed, needs as we go. And like right now, there's a need for a daycare. I have to drive 20 minutes one way to drop my son off at daycare and then drive home and then drive back and get him and drive home again. And a lot of us have that problem. So there was a problem. We've got the space. So we're taking the initiative to fill that problem with trying to put a daycare in. So that's just one example.
Yeah, in our case, we did the needs assessment because we needed to know if there was a broad and a multicultural support. So we interviewed Indigenous groups, we interviewed local economic groups, the farmers market, the other groups that had interests in similar things, Arts Guild and groups of artists, because we wanted to know we were doing the right thing in terms of reuse. And there was a history of the Summer School of the Arts here in Fort Qu'Appelle in the old sanatorium. So we could build on that history in Fort Qu'Appelle, which helped. But we have multi-purpose spaces. So we were quite surprised at the things that people come to use the place for. The First Nations Health Council has their workshops and their meetings there. The multi-purpose room upstairs next to the dance studio, I'd say it's been primarily used for yoga classes. So it's a fluid use as different groups in the community see a purpose for it. And that's what we always intended. So it could be called an arts, cultural, and wellness center as easily as just an arts center. And there is the need for that. Would it be used more if there were organizations parallel to us like Valley Dance, which has its own structure and hires its own instructors? Absolutely. So the future of something like this, a co-op potters group, the Arts Guild is now in there. They're located in there. So if there's more clusters of groups that themselves self-organize, then the nonprofit group can be a coordinator and a governance body and not an animator. We host some things because otherwise they won't be done. But to me, the model is a much more viable model with different clusters of groups that want arts and cultural activities. Summer school activities for kids, for example, if there was a parents group that would take that on, that would make the space more usable. That's all organizing work, of course, but it's a model that I think has more possibilities.
Jim, part of your response there anticipated one of the next questions here. Someone was wondering about partnership activities or opportunities with local First Nations. You mentioned the use of meeting rooms. Are there other areas that have been explored or maybe taken advantage of?
We've remember that out here the Treaty 4 Center exists, and they do art and other exhibits at the what they call the Treaty 4 teepee. And so we're not attempting in any sense. We're a parallel group that sometimes there might be a First Nations artist who rents and exhibits. And we have had some First Nations artists on the board, but there's tons of arts education going on in First Nations communities that are self-organized out of Treaty 4. So we're not, I think it's fair to say there's been partnerships along the way, but we're trying to make sure the town, as a multicultural town, has a art center available to it.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other immediate questions. If anyone,
There's one here,
Has it?
Marvin.
oh,
There's one here, Marvin, about
oh,
if our building is self-sufficient or do we
sorry.
seek funding?
Yes,
Yes, we are self-sufficient. We don't receive any municipal funding. So between the memberships, rent, donations, and then our thrift store, coffee sales, that's how we've been able to be financially self-sufficient. And then grants help to cover some of those special capital projects and our summer programming to help pay for those.
yes. Sorry, Claire,
Yeah,
I
and
missed the
our-
question almost. Thanks for
Our
jumping in, Jeff.
our grants have been about a third, when I calculate it. The Connexus grant built our wheelchair ramp. We had a Saskatchewan Heritage Foundation, which allowed us to get the bell tower and the eaves sort of restored along heritage grounds. And the CIF was 50,000. But actually, once the building was being used, it generated sufficient funds to operate it. And we haven't actually had to even rely on town grants, though that model makes some sense because, of course, they put money into sports and rec. And at some point might very well, it's their building, want to contribute grants for arts and cultural, programming in the community. But we have a surplus now. We've created a contingency fund, which we certainly needed during the pandemic. We've never really charged a lot. Our access is one of our values. We want people to come. So our events are very, very reasonable, and our commission is very, very low on sales or use of space or rent. But if you have a lot of activities and the place is used a lot, it's been sufficient to keep us going. If we hired part-time staff, that would of course change the thing quite dramatically.
Yeah, I think that's important, Jim, is keeping it accessible. And we do the same. We keep our memberships low, we keep our rent low, to try and make the building as accessible to as many people as we possibly can.
Yep.
Yeah, Jen, I was thinking about the grounds there. You mentioned the playground. That sounds like a great asset for the community and well enjoyed and well appreciated. I imagine you have quite a bit of space there. Do you do other outdoor activities on the space? There's still like ball fields or picnic grounds. I'm wondering, things like that.
Yeah, there is pretty rough ball diamond and football field and stuff. We don't really utilize it for that anymore because we have a separate sports grounds just outside of town. But I did mention a few of the things we've done. And yeah, like I said, we're gonna have the 4-H Beef Achievement Day here and our homecoming. And we usually just set up temporary structures for those of kind of events. But we're hoping to be able to utilize the playground for more outdoor spaces. And then of course the daycare will be able to utilize that new playground as well.
Oh, that's great. And now somebody's asking, Jen, is if your economic development position is full or part-time? I know you wear a couple of hats or hats for a couple of municipalities there.
Yeah, I'm considered part-time. So my position is a partnership between the ABC Center, the Village, and the RM. So they all contribute, and actually our rec board contributes a little bit now as well. And so I have a lot of flexibility in my hours. I'm a contractor, so I just have so many hours a year to do with as I please. So, but it would be considered part-time.
Considered part-time, I noticed you said, and I'm sure you probably kept pretty full-time busy, I expect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm passionate about it, so I volunteer a lot of my time on things as well because I'm a community member like everybody else. So
that's great. Okay, we're coming up to the top of the hour here. One last call out for questions. And if we're seeing none, that would bring us to the end of today's webinar. And I just want to thank our presenters very much. We couldn't do these webinars, obviously, without them generously taking the time to be with us and to share the stories of their projects. And thank you $2 guest for coming out today. And next Tuesday's webinar is going to take a deep look at Wanuskewin Heritage Park and the park's bid for a UNESCO World Heritage status, which would be a first for Saskatchewan if it's successful. So for anyone interested in a late registration, I'll just put that contact information in the chat and leave it open for a little while. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marvin.
Bye-bye.
Good luck, Jen.
Yeah, same to you. Love your project.